Hello and welcome to Complementary Colors. I'm joined here today with Ashley Killian.
Hello.
And two very special guests from Steelcase, McKenna Hall.
Hi.
And Danielle Razo.
Hello.
They're joining us today in the studio from both LA and Portland. So we're excited to have you in Alaska. How are you enjoying Alaska in general?
Loving it here.
Yes, it's been awesome.
We were talking about the fact that it's April and we woke up to snow and they're excited and we're like, okay, well, if you're excited, we're okay with it.
We're a little over it.
Yeah, we're over it for sure. Okay, well, are you guys ready to dive into the conversation for today?
Let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
So first off, what is your role at Steelcase? Danielle, we'll start with you.
Okay, so I am the vice president of sales for the West. So I kind of cover the territory of Alaska all the way down to San Diego and then Hawaii and Vegas. I call it the island of good. So I love it here on the West Coast. I was born and raised in Southern California and just happy to be here.
That's exciting. Okay, McKenna.
Hi, I'm a client business manager at Steelcase. So I'm based in Portland, as you said, and I am on Danielle's team. And it's been great to be here. It's been just about a year and a half so far.
A year and a half. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I think that a lot of listeners are like, okay, Steelcase got the roles, but how did you get into those roles? Like, where were you before you're like, I'm going to work for Steelcase?
You want to go first?
So I started my career as a dealer designer at a company called Hyphen. So they are based in Portland. They cover all of Oregon and Southwest Washington, and they are one of the Steelcase dealers that covered the area. And so it was such a great place to grow up. I started as an intern, and then after college, I moved back and joined the team full time, which was a great experience. And I had so much exposure to commercial design and the different industries we get to be a part of. And since we were a Steelcase dealer, I met the team, worked closely with them, fell in love with the company and the products and the reasons why Steelcase is who they are and where they're going in the future. And so I was at a place in my career, I just passed my NCIDQ, and I was looking for what's my next challenge and where do I want to go from here? And it was kind of when opportunities land in your lap, you got to take a leap of faith and try it out. And so I loved that this role had the opportunity to grow into a larger global company where I got to continue working with my team at Hyphen, but I also got to work with people all over. And what I love too are so many people on the team have been at Steelcase for years and years, but had multiple different jobs. And there was so much growth opportunity under one umbrella that I got really excited at what that could be. And I just love pushing myself to find something new.
So you guys had like the best of both worlds there, where you got to keep your old team and then grow into a new position globally. That's really cool. Not all people get to do that.
It's been great.
Danielle, what about you?
Long career. So
tell us about it.
So I've been in the industry for about 15 years. My background was originally in architecture. I mean, sketched as a child, always thought I'd be an architect. Realized I love design, but I liked critique even more, which I know sounds crazy for anybody in the design community. That's like usually the part that people are scared of.
Totally, like petrified scared when you say Ashley.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not critique.
It's unique.
Yeah, critique day was my favorite day. So I switched my major to real estate finance, double majored, so finished the architecture piece. And when I was looking for a career, I really wanted the intersection between design and business.
Which is harder to find than you think.
Yeah. And Steelcase was a bit of a surprise. I thought I'd end up in real estate development or be a broker. And I took an interview with Steelcase. I was still in college, trying to find my path. And I was blown away by just the innovation and the culture of the organization. So it's a 120-year-old business, but publicly traded, but still operates very similar to like a privately owned company. The founding families are still part of the board, and I was always taken back by the culture. So I started my career at Steelcase in '05, and I was always the pilot for roles. The business was pivoting into understanding design and the design community, having much more empathy and understanding to how you approach the business. And so I was a part of that initial role
Very
to
cool.
support the A&D community. That led me to being an applications consultant. I was actually designing for Steelcase. And then I took a departure. So I'm a boomerang in the business. I went to go work for the dealer.
You left and came back.
Exactly. I left and came back. I did 6 years at the company. I left. I went to the dealer, which we'll talk about at some point in this, 20-minute or hour, however the podcast, about just the dealer experience and what that means in terms of our success. And then I found myself in graduate school studying a second language and trying to find a new career. So I did 2 years consulting for the Department of Defense and design thinking.
Which is cool. We'll
It's
get more on
very
that
cool.
later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more later. And ultimately, I ran into my old leader at Steelcase, and this is back in 2015, and he asked if I would come back. And ultimately, I wanted to build teams. I wanted to be a part of building teams. And so I've been lucky enough to do that now in a couple iterations, and most recently running this business.
That's very cool. So it's like almost like you're taking your design skills of space and the empathy you have for people that you're designing that space for, but then are like taking that and creating the teams that make those work even better. So it's like the ultimate designer.
Yeah,
I think it's a talent in itself.
Yeah, best leaders, I think, are servant leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to ask, have you taken the Gottman test?
I have not taken the Gottman test.
Okay, so if you take the Gottman test, you owe me a drink or something when you get individualization as your like top one, because that's the person that like is inherently good at creating teams, period. And I have one of it. It's not my top one, but it's part of my like top 5. And I was like, oh, it is fun putting the right people together to make the right thing happen. And you're like the pro at it. So it's a good one.
Okay,
Gottman
test.
Individualization, which sounds really weird. That doesn't sound like a team creator. So read what it is. Cause I was like, what? Okay.
I remember that
I
with
can
you.
get it. Yeah.
You had that one pretty high.
Yeah, we took a leadership, a women in leadership. Oh my God, that was like a year ago from this week.
It literally was, yeah.
The Power of You. So SALT, a firm here locally, puts on a Power of You twice a year. And it's a 3-day retreat for females in leadership roles.
I love that.
And it changed my perspective.
Yeah.
I left going, what?
Everybody there just was blown away from the experience.
My expectations going in were high. My expectations come out were just like mind blown. So
Just another reason to come back to Alaska.
sign up for the
Right.
Power of You by SALT. But on the dealer note, so Ashley here spent 10 years at our local Steelcase dealer, and it is really interesting to see the hybrid connection between design school, dealer, and manufacturing rep. So when you guys are on the dealer level, what is the biggest difference between how you work with the manufacturer and how you work with, like, let's say me in the design world?
Ooh, I'm curious about this one.
How do you balance both of those perspectives? Because we're here, cloud 9, and then the dealer's like, this is what I can. It's black and white. Cloud 9, black and white. How do you make that magic happen?
The vision and the reality.
Yes.
It's a great question. I think it does stem to that team building, right? That partnership. Capital in Town with John Rafferty. I mean, these are incredible partners that you can sit side by side with. And that is probably the biggest surprise that I had going into this business almost 15 years ago. As a manufacturer's rep, I did not know or understand that importance of having a dealer partner that is really there for day 2, and they're there to kind of make sure that clients and, quite frankly, you guys are taken care of when the project is completed. And that's been probably one of the most fulfilling sides of the business, is building those relationships and seeing these individuals build their business locally to support their clients.
Yeah. So you're like the extension of that dealer right now.
In a lot of ways. Yeah.
So McKenna, coming out of the dealer and having that relationship still with the dealer, how is that difference for you?
I love it. I think it's been such a great experience. It's taught me so many perspectives and lessons on both sides. It's kind of allowed me to have a bridge between the two realities. And, you mentioned, how do we work differently with our A&D community and our dealer community? And really, both of those communities are clients. Whether, we go differently with A&D or our dealers, those are our number one teams that we want to support. And so what I love is that we get to be a part of that initial collaboration, and really, how do you bring the beauty and the brains together, and how do you have this amazing innovation and creativity come together in a room? And I find the most successful projects are when we're all at the table together and we're here with a common goal. We want to support your overall design intent. We want to bring expertise to help, because furniture is a crazy world. It is a wild west.
Wild west. Wild west is, it's the wild west.
That's a great description.
It is. And so I just love being able to bring that magic together. And really, when you see the creative energy collide, I think that's when our clients get the best experiences and the best output. And really, at the end of the day, we forget, or it's easy to forget, we're all humans. We're not robots doing this work. And so I know for myself personally, I get so much energy and excitement out of those moments and those, big workshops and design charrettes. And so for me, it's really what gets me excited, and that I love that it's always different, it's always unique, and it's just a really cool part of our community that you don't necessarily learn about in school. I mean, Ashley, I don't know if you agree.
You don't.
Or not. Yeah,
and Ashley, I'd love to hear your perspective on that too, coming from, you were interior designer with an interior design firm, went to the dealer for 10 years, so not a blink. Right. It was a good stint, and then came back to the architecture world. How is that transition back?
It's been eye-opening. I think, first starting out in kind of the dealer designer role, I was like, what is going on here? All these parts and pieces, just learning the ins and outs of even just specifying a workstation. There's so much to it. The detail is pretty out of control. You have to really be very detail-oriented to really, be successful. So doing that for 10 years and then kind of being picked up at MCG and working on the design side of things, I'm like, okay, you kind of see the other side of things, of the more like visionary and the more just creative process.
The client asks.
Yeah, the client asks. Yeah. But it's fun to be on this side too, because I get to be more creative versus the dealer where you're kind of just working more with the client. I didn't have as much creative ability. So now I've got that creative ability and kind of being that translator to like what it's like being from the dealer to, our industry. It's, there's definitely different languages. And so to try to mesh those together has been kind of an interesting experience through working at MCG.
So you'd call yourself like the sheriff of the Wild Wild West.
Maybe so. Yes.
You're coming into my world, and how are you going to be here? How do you fit in? Well, that's really interesting. I know that you guys have touched a lot on the fact that Steelcase is a global company, which is nothing to bat your eye at. And I think that a lot of people will hear global company, hear all of the countries you're in, all of the things that Steelcase does, but still understanding that it is still a niche, right? Is so specialized in what you guys do, and the detail and the time and the research and the education that Steelcase puts into everything they do is top of the line. I know nothing against anybody else, but Steelcase's white papers and that research tab has been a huge resource for me for like at least 15 years. It's a go-to of like, okay, well, what is the cutting edge research? And we know that Steelcase has interviewed someone somewhere in the world with this issue, or challenge or success or something. And even the other day I was on there, and it was like a really awesome thing on the FBI even, which is very interesting because we'll do a lot of design for the military. So just reading this interview with the FBI and understanding how their use of work is different and as flexible as everybody wants to be in the world. They can't necessarily be that way because of their job, but how else they can support the other side of that. So very, very good research. So I want to ask you, what do you think is the most like successful thing about Steelcase thus far?
The most successful thing.
Yeah. Like your favorite thing about it.
So I have two answers.
Okay. Let's go one.
The first is innovation.
It's a good one. Innovation's always good to have in a company.
We have never been like the followers, and you see that at NeoCon every year. And I've really loved to see this, 100-year-old company completely reinvent themselves over and over again and really challenge the status quo. Everything from material science to the way we design product, to the way you package things. About 4 years ago, when the world kind of changed, we did a deep dive in terms of understanding how people would meet in the future. This idea of, hybrid workplace. And for individuals like myself, I was always working hybrid. I think that doctor's appointments never really went away. Like, we're still doing these things.
Absolutely. Life
this idea of
happens still.
Picking up your kids. So, but I do think the research we've done in terms of understanding how people meet and how to create inclusivity and that experience for every user on the screen is improving. And that's been really incredible to watch. We've been lucky enough to have partners like Microsoft who are also pushing the boundaries of tech and being able to blend their technology with kind of quick sprints in custom designs. We have our own custom design house at Steelcase called Studio B, and we'll go with we go to our largest organizations, largest tech companies, and Fortune 100 who have these kind of big ideas of what they want to do, and we'll design products specifically for them. And so part of
like
our hybrid, like the FBI.
Da-da-da.
So our new ocular table was an outcome of that, and this idea of creating a different type of meeting space. To answer your question on the other side of what I think is most incredible about this organization, and it's why I've stayed at this company for so long, is the culture. We've always believed that space and behavior over time creates the culture of an organization, and we definitely live that. And I think our company has done that very well. So most of my cohorts have been with the company 35 years, 25 years, and you see that over the long duration of people staying with the organization.
That's really cool. And we got to sit in that Oculus table last month. God,
New York.
What time is it?
Yeah.
In New York. And it was really interesting. I'm really happy that we weren't just sitting there talking to each other, and we got to be presented with someone on the screen because it was definitely a much better interaction between the person on the screen and the table that was in the room. And then having the fact that all of the small details, right? All the faces are at the bottom of the screen, not the top. Because I was listening to this podcast, weird, and they were talking about how hybrid meetings are so exhausting because digital screens have been taking over our world. And the fact that we are hyper-focusing on eye contact, which we don't necessarily always do in person. Like, you're not always just staring across the table, creepy. Hi, how are you? Like, that would be weird, right? But when you're trying to make a connection digitally, that actually is not weird, and it seems to be more acceptable. So we are hyper-focusing on eye contact, which takes a lot of energy, but then we're also looking at ourselves in that box and wherever that box is in the corner. And the switching back and forth from that is completely annihilating our attention span, which I thought was like, wow, that's different science. I had not heard that stat before.
I think that's what Steelcase does so
really
well.
Interesting to see how that was starting to come out in the research when we did the tour last month. So, all right, McKenna, what about you?
I think building off of what Danielle was saying around innovation, I think something that I have always been really inspired by, and one of the reasons why I was so excited to join the team is Steelcase's work around really our business drivers are focused on how do we design these better futures for people and the planet. So as I was talking about earlier, we're not all robots. We're people. We're humans at the end of this. And I think it speaks a lot to why our culture works so well, because that is a core principle of what we're doing. And we're not here to just create products to put out in the world. We have enough products in this world. We really want to find what are those problems we're solving for? How can we make it a better experience? Because again, we don't want to just put something out to be there. We want it to have a positive impact. And so, through our hybrid collaboration research we've been doing, it's all intertwined with inclusive design. How are we supporting neurodiversity? How are we using trauma-informed design for these spaces? And then how are we also giving back? What are the impacts we're having? How can we have a positive impact on a broader scale? And Steelcase has led, again, through that innovation. We've met a lot of firsts in our industry, and it's something I'm very proud of, and I think it's only going to continue to evolve. For example, we were the first to reach carbon neutral in 2020.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's not a small feat.
Yep. We are the first to set goals to become carbon negative by 2030. And we're on track to do so. We're third-party certified. These are all science-based targets that we're focusing on. And really, it's, again, what is that ripple effect we're having? So it's not just the work we're doing. What are our dealer partners doing? What are our distribution partners doing? Where are we sourcing these materials? And I think it's just been such an exciting place to be and grow. We were the first to offer carbon neutral products as well. So our test seating and 2 of our height adjustable desks. And, we beat the Apple Watch. It was a lot of time and energy of how can we have a lasting impact, and how can we put this energy back into our world, and how can we support these people. For example, one of the carbon offsets and the programs that we work with is for a program based in Africa, where with these carbon offsets, we then can contribute to families having access to clean cooking.
Wow.
So, oftentimes they'll be in enclosed spaces, and it's like having a campfire in your home with windows closed. And, we know from health risks, and it's just a major concern. And so by partnering with these other programs, we've been able to make an impact and provide families with generational benefits. So it's just something I'm really proud of, and I love that we get to be a part of it, and I love that it's not going to stop here.
Yeah. It has so much potential to grow. Like, it is limitless. That's definitely a cool thing. And then you're talking about partners, right? And all this research that you guys get to almost have like your hands on it first, right? So what do you like when you get this new, clearly I'm a research geek when it comes to knowing about neurodiversity and all those things. What do you, how is it presented to you? Like we don't, maybe Ashley knows. I don't, because I've never been in the dealer or manufacturing world. So how is it presented to you so that you can share it with us? Like, how does that trickle down and that ripple effect happen to get to little old me in Alaska as a designer sitting at my desk? How do you guys do that?
You want to start?
You can go. It primarily starts with primary researchers in Grand Rapids, which is where our headquarters are based. We have a collection of workspace futures teams. They're anthropologists, sociologists, people that are going into other parts of industry to understand kind of what's at the forefront of design or innovation in all aspects.
Research department.
It's a whole research department.
Grand Rapids,
so about 20 people. And they're really looking at our business and the future of workplace, let's say 20 years out.
Okay.
And what are those signals? And through their research, it translates into a couple different facets. One, it actually translates into product design. What are we seeing? A part of it then translates to our research team. So they're on-the-ground consultants that work with clients and help them innovate, whether it's change management or get to the future in their business. And then the last piece is not holding all that information for ourselves, but translating it into the market. And so that team will actually take all that research and compile it into whether it's a CEU or even the white papers that you read online. We believe in like full transparency. A lot of times it's hard to dig through all the information on the steelcase.com website because there just is so much, but it's all there. And it's this idea that almost like paying it forward. We've done the research, but if a design firm or a client can make use of that intel and go do something good with it, we're a resource to that.
I wanted to go back to the simple fact, or the small fact that you said, but it's a small to maybe a listener, but huge to me. You have a research department under Steelcase. So you are hiring sociologists, anthropologists. I mean, that in itself is really cool. Small detail. Then the next small detail that adds up to a really cool result is the fact that you share all of it. You're investing in this research. These are your employees and you're sharing it with everybody. So you're giving out your why, right? So when we look at trends, and for those that are listening, if you're assuming that we're coming out with like an open office concept because it's a trend, it really is not based on any kind of trend. It's based on science. It's based on the research that Steelcase and others do with these anthropologists and sociologists. So I think that small detail you said was kind of has a big ripple. Because I think we in the furniture industry and interior design in general get kind of looped into that fashion trend movements. And color can play in that for sure. But the movements that we're seeing from private offices to open offices and all the development of neurodiversity and inclusion and equity, all of that is based on these special people that are helping us understand what is coming at us, what we've been doing good, what we can work on better, and how we can just be in general better human beings. So I wanted to make note of that, which was a pretty cool thing. Also, McKenna, so you have, well, first of all, you're both females in what someone might assume is a pretty female-dominated world in this industry. And you're like, it's actually not.
Not much. Yeah.
So we were having this conversation the other day, and it was interesting because the furniture world has a lot of males in it, even though the interior design world is lacking that presence and is more female. So I feel like the blend of the furniture and the interior design is like a really great balance now of both female and males and all DEI. It's a really good blend of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So 20 years ago, when we were in high school, college, wherever we were 20 years ago, it was not like that. Don't you think?
Oh, completely different.
I was like, where are all the women? So I wanted to hear from you guys how you've seen the trend evolve to be a little bit more female orientated in leadership through your manufacturing process. Manufacturing is very male dominated. Have you seen that trend, I'll call it a trend, continue to move upward?
Yes, in all respects. And I think part of it is it's a macro view and then how Steelcase has responded to it. I've always, and this is more personal, for whatever reason, I've always ended up in industries or interests that tended to be lean towards male dominated. So architecture, for an example, is where I started.
All of that. Yep.
Real estate finance, always male dominated. And when I came to the company, I was probably one of the only females, if not one of the only minorities. I think over a 20-year span time, we have seen, I think our business within itself has been much more, we've pivoted to be much more design oriented and lend itself to hiring a group that can speak to that in that way. So hiring more females that can relate to the interior design community that's predominantly female. What's interesting is that over the past 10 years, it was still predominantly male leadership. And about 3 years ago, our organization, the board, made the decision to nominate Sarah Armbruster as our first female CEO. And
that was 3 years ago?
That was 3 years ago.
Okay, awesome.
And she set in place benchmarks to improve DEI and improve diversity whether that be male or female or just in general diversity with all areas of our organization.
Yeah.
And so those benchmarks were set about 3 years ago when she came into place. And it's been, quite frankly, just really wonderful to see the number of women in the organization just get celebrated. And I think that's beyond Steelcase. I think that's just within manufacturing in general.
And so, personal question.
Yes.
How does that make you feel personally when you see that happen? Does that give you hope and inspiration, or feel like you're heard more? Like, what does that translate to you personally?
I think it builds a future where, so I have a 5-year-old daughter at home, and it builds a future where you can pretty much do anything and be anything.
I like it.
And I was talking to McKenna on the drive over here about what do I see, or trends that I've seen just in young women, young professional women. And if there's any mark or anything that I could leave the business world, is telling young women in their 20s not to plan their life around the job that they think they can't have because they want it all.
Snaps to that.
So I think there is a perception in the mindset that you have to do more to get to a certain level, or you're working longer hours, or and it's not true. Every human has 24 hours in the day. It's the way you use that time. And I think there is a incredible moment in time for us to be able to lean into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that answer. All right, McKenna, what have you seen on your side of that fence?
I would say it is such an awesome inspiration to have. I mean, having Danielle as a leader of our West Business Group has always been a big highlight for myself. We have a lot of other female leaders, and so I love that there's this trajectory of grab a seat. We all want you to be here. And it's inspiring as I'm newer in my career and newer in my role that there is this really endless opportunity for growth. And why not have that open mindset, kind of like what Danielle was saying of, I think it's easy to get trapped in maybe I'm not qualified for that, or
Absolutely.
I don't have enough experience for that. And I love that we're in a community and a culture that we want to encourage that to be the norm. We want people to try, and that's been a really great impact. I've, also grew up around a lot of really strong women. My mom was always a working mom, and she went back to school and got her master's and now runs her own clinic. And it's just been great. I've been surrounded by these really empowering women. And so I recognize that, 30 years ago, if I were this age, it may not have been the same experience. We were talking at dinner once, and it was, when did women get allowed to have their own bank account?
Pop quiz.
Yes.
When were women allowed to have their own bank account and own property?
Yes. Shockingly, recently. Not long. Do you have a guess?
Yeah, Danielle, what's your guess?
So I'm going to answer it with a comment. So my mother started her company, her business. She was born in 1949. Sorry, Mom. And she has run her business for 50 years, which is pretty incredible. When she started her business, she could not get a business loan without her dad signing the loan papers, and she was 19. So my guess is somewhere.
Your mom was 19 years old.
Yes.
So in the 50s, and she's starting her own business.
Yes.
That's amazing.
What a badass.
I just know.
Kudos to your mom. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Side note, badass.
I know. Side note, 50 years in the business, run her own company. It's kind of incredible. But and fearless, just absolutely fearless. But she does that comment around not being able to have your own business credit card, not being able to sign a business loan. So my guess is somewhere in the 60s.
Actually, 74.
Oh, God, that's
Your poor
heartbreaking.
mom.
Mm-hmm.
Really, honestly.
Rough.
Unless you got married and then the husband signed for everything. But yeah, females couldn't own any of that until 1974. Legally, on paper.
Isn't that insane?
Mind blowing.
And I think for me, it puts so much in perspective, right? That single fact changes what our experiences are in this world and what we can achieve. And I love that your mom, she's like, well, screw that. I'm still going to run my business and I'm still going to find a way. And so I think that is such an inspiring message to have. And, I also had another moment recently. The West Business Group got together which I always love. It's always fun to reconnect and understand what's going on and what are people seeing. And we had a few sessions where people would share updates, and I shared an update on a project I was doing, and I had a slide of every teammate I got to work with in this project. And it didn't even encompass everyone, but it was so cool in front of our whole West Business group. Out of the 20 people, 18 of them were all female, and like major players in the game. And, of course it was during March, and International Women's Day it was just such a fun moment to celebrate. We have all of these powerful, strong and innovative, creative, and just intelligent people in our sphere, in our world. It's great to see these people have bigger platforms to be a part of the conversation.
And a better avenue to attain their goals, which is always going to be good for anybody and all areas of inclusion. So I think when I was doing research on it, 20 years ago, we were talking about like when I was just getting out of school, dating myself. I definitely didn't see as many women at the table as I do now. And the research was showing me that actually in the last 10 years alone, female leadership has gone up 114%.
Wow.
I know.
I love that.
So one decade, we've just kind of like leaps and bounds over with a huge global pandemic in it. So kudos to us female leaders.
I think it just goes to show we're better together.
It's so true. Support.
We've had the male support. We haven't had the male support, but now that we're getting more seats at the table, there's more ideas being thrown out, and people are being listened to and taken seriously, whereas in the past that hasn't happened. So I feel like, together we can do a lot more.
Yeah, especially highlighting the knowledge that we can bring to the table and the other benefits that we are as just females. Like there's a reason why there are females and males. Like there's an energy balance, the yin and the yang. So not having both of those at the table is definitely not going to be the best trajectory. It's not like it's not going to get you anywhere, but you could go a little bit further with a little bit more balance. I also thought it was really interesting that 40% of females that are in leadership are business owners now.
Cool.
Yeah. I was like,
incredible. It's a great statistic.
40% are female business owners.
And I have to imagine it's only climbing.
Yeah. Right.
I hope
this was a 2023 study. So
yeah, that's awesome.
There's a whole nother year in there to add some statistics to it. But yeah, so in what we perceive the last decade to be pretty male dominated is definitely softening up and allowing females to step into some of these roles. And I thought it was really fun. Just for fun, I just Googled female leadership to see like what would come out. And I thought it was really interesting. So it's like the first hit was the American Psychological Association title, Women Leaders Make Work Better. Second one, Forbes, What is Female Leadership and Why We Need It? Second hit, World Economics Forum, Having Women in Leadership Roles is More Important Than Anything. Harvard Business Law, How Women Manage Gender Norms and Make It Better. I was just like, wow, there's a lot. There's a lot here for what we've been studying in the past decades to make that nudge in diversity a little bit more equitable for females. And I think it's great to see that we're now doing that for all. So it's like, again, harping on your better together. We're really showing the science behind why that balance is really important. And so on that note, I was curious, in Steelcase, I know in our world, we are having a global talent shortage, and we're feeling that. Are you guys feeling that?
I think there's a talent shortage
everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere. And I see it from, large tech companies to design to just the knowledge worker and where businesses need to hire. Huge gap. And I do foresee that to, quite frankly, get worse over the next decade.
That's what they were saying, which is so sad. I was just gonna hit you with that, but you knew it already. Yeah. Don't. Yeah, it's kind of sad. And I was reading a study that I think there was like 15,000 people in between 15 countries that asked certain questions about why. They were just kind of trying to understand the economics behind it. And it was really interesting to hear that it wasn't at all about pay. not even a little bit about your pay. It was all about the challenging work, skill development, and flexibility. I was like, wow, that's such a shift. Because I think if they would have taken that study 10 years ago, it probably would have been pay. Mm-hmm. And with our inflation, I mean, it's surprising that pay is not up there as high as the challenging work, skill development, and flexibility, just because of where we're at in our financial picture in the global universe. But I thought it was really interesting that, really individual choice and preference is ringing high and true. And it just nods back to the research that, Steelcase is doing to understand. I'm sure your team already knew that and knew that like 10 years ago because they're global forecasters. But it's really interesting to see that this talent shortage can be helped and addressed by the right solutions in space, and how we're applying that space to the company and making the culture actually shine instead of it just being a shiny pay benefits package.
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting to see how that shift is kind of shifting into our realm of how we're taking empathy and creating something to give them something back that is an experiential thing, not just a one-time payment every 2 weeks. Do you have anything to add to that comment?
Yeah,
I see you like nodding your head. You're like,
Yeah. Well, I think back to, so when I joined, when I went into the industry in 2005, there was a CEO at the time around generations at work. And it was a conversation around what we're experiencing today, which was a lot of people, people that have incredible knowledge base in any industry, across any industry, that were retiring at mass speed.
And they were scared of us millennials.
Scared of the millennials. And now we're the ones, that they can't promote fast enough because there is such a gap in terms of those knowledge workers in that generation, and trying to attract, retain, and develop the next generation fast enough to keep their business, whatever business it happens to be, going forward. I do think space adds an interesting layer to it. And I think COVID, even in a more interesting way, where it sent everybody home and everyone had this perspective, okay, we're all going to stay at home moving forward. And there is a researcher at Stanford who I just listened to as a podcast a couple weeks ago. And forgive me, I don't know his name, but he talked about the idea that that hybrid would never really go away, in the sense that we do believe people will be in the office 3 to 4 days a week. But if he was going to advise a 20-year-old, a 22-year-old leaving college, that absolutely I would not, he would advise that student to take a job that was in the office 5 days a week.
Absolutely.
For mentorship and development. And the other side of that story is a business owner to remind the senior level executives or leaders in their organization that part of their role is to mentor and develop the youngest people in that office, because at some point they're going to retire, and that the health of the overall organization, right, feeds off that. And so I do think space is more important than ever. And maybe it's not, sitting in a cubicle and being on your computer for 8 hours a day. It's more around the social spaces.
Yeah.
And how do you connect? And of course you need privacy. It's going to be the most important thing in terms of how do you take these hybrid calls. But the social aspect and the social collaboration that individuals have within the office is really the key component to your business's success moving forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that COVID definitely gave us a perspective that life and work are kind of mutually exclusive, that you can do both in a 24-hour period of time, and it doesn't need to be as segmented as we thought it needed to be before. So McKenna, I'm really curious to see what you've seen successfully play out since our comeback to work challenges on supporting those folks that are full-time or the hybrid in the office. How are you attracting and advising people to attract them back?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think a lot of it builds off of these different buckets of research that all really combine together. as Danielle mentioned earlier, Steelcase has been doing research on our workforce since the beginning of the pandemic, long before, but in relation to the pandemic. And we've, surveyed over 63,000 employees, and we've continued to do it every year. And what I love about our most recent launch of our sharing this information is we compared the workplace tensions between what are leaders wanting and expecting and what are those employees needing and wanting, because it's not always the same, and oftentimes they can directly conflict.
That is a really good point. So you're looking at both challenges to find that middle ground.
There's so much employee empowerment, and we really want to celebrate that. And one of the things that I find is really interesting, again, building off of that Stanford study and what you were just sharing as well, is, the top 3 reasons of why employees want to come to the office, they're focused around getting their work done and getting it done efficiently. The next 4 reasons are all around socialization and building those relationships. And I think it speaks so much to kind of our human nature. And when we really strip it down to our hierarchy of needs, right? It's that human connection.
Yeah.
And I think it's so imperative now. Danielle and I were talking about it on the way over, is there really is such a global epidemic, and in zooming in even on the U.S. on mental health, on depression. What are those social anxieties, and how do we come back together, and how do we support individuals? Because we're not coming back together in the same capacity. Everyone has different experiences. Everyone has different outcomes and outlooks on what, the last 4 years has done.
Yeah.
And so I think where the best successes are is where we can really understand and use that design thinking. How do we go through this iterative process and leverage the empathy that we have to understand different organizations, different teams, and different individuals to find a solution that works best? Because I think, as Danielle was saying, hybrid collaboration is here to stay. Hybrid work is not going to just go away. I think it's going to continue to evolve, and it's going to be an ongoing journey. So how can we kind of jump into it, get excited about it, and not be afraid to make a mistake?
Okay, we can put floaties on.
Yes.
And just, sit there in the sunshine and figure it out. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be like a solution like that. You had made a reference to challenges with both leadership and empowering the workforce. What is a simple example?
I think an example that comes to mind. So think of real estate utilization. A lot of organizations are looking at their floor plans and they're seeing the square footage they have and they're thinking, holy cow.
Yeah.
When we come to the bottom line, X amount of square footage is not in use whatsoever. People aren't coming in. So we either need to change the real estate or we need to get rid of it entirely. But what leaders are also saying is, we know people want to come back together to collaborate. So I'm not going to go find a larger office necessarily. What can I do with the existing space? Maybe I'm even going to downsize, and maybe I'm going to remove some of those individual spaces to bring in these collaboration spaces, because I know that's why people want to come together. Now, at the same time, some employees are saying, I want to come back and I want to know I have an individual space.
Yeah, that's where my stuff goes. And,
there's
feel comfort.
There's a psychological comfort, there's a safety, and there's also expectations of, is this commute going to be worth it today?
That's a good point. Is today worth going into the office?
Yes. And what I think is, I'm finding and I'm hearing and driving over and over is, it's no longer just the commute into the office. Is this commute worth leaving my desk for? Am I going to have the other spaces in the office?
Have we not had that one a daily?
Really?
Do I have to go to this meeting, or is it? Oh, it's virtual.
Exactly. And so what I am excited about is, how can we solve these tensions in space, and how can we create spaces that can be adaptable and flexible to where the employees can take over, they can own it for whatever experience they need without having to engage facilities every time or without having to ask permission. We want it to be hackable. We want it to be changeable. And I think it's exciting to find a balance there.
I think it's really interesting too, from perspective of I would say I'm hybrid, but I'm not hybrid as in like home all the time. I'm really home when I'm in focus tasks, and focus tasks aren't necessarily every week even, so it's very very all over the board for myself. But I do know that when I am in the office doing collaborative work, that doesn't happen at my desk, nor should it happen in my, I'll call it organized chaos. Like find a seat somewhere. So I think that that's also a good benefit to understand that when you've got even just one worker that just works from home half a day, 1.5 days, that's still space that's not being used for 1.5 days of the 5-day week. So taking and allocating these spaces that can be used by anyone that's there at any time, at any day, is really interesting way to think of something differently than ownership of space. So I'm starting to kind of see that shift, especially in our own office when we're going through the same hybrid morph. And then, of course, getting all this knowledge, you're like, oh, that makes sense. And then understanding, because we know each other pretty well, right? So we're like, yeah, that personality, that fits that piece of science. So it's really interesting. It's almost like our little office is a science project. I'll call it a science project. And the interior design department got smaller desk footprints a year ago. And I have not missed my large desk at all. Probably because I live in organized chaos. So it's less chaos to be around me, but I haven't needed it. And now I'm able to get more stuff done, know where everything is. So there's like a really good benefit to shrinking your personal space and getting that back in social spaces. So,
well, you're going to adapt to whatever you get.
Yeah, that's true.
Eventually,
And I would add to that as well as, we want to balance it, right? Because change can be really hard. We've all gone through a lot of change the last few years, and some people are more adaptable than others. And what we found to be successful is maybe I don't own a desk, but I have a locker where I can put my stuff. Yeah. I know it's mine. It gives that psychological comfort where we need to be efficient in how we use our space, but you can still have a place, or, how do we allocate our things that are personal to us, and how do we organize this chaos that is personal to you where it's effective? So I think it's not going to be a one size fits all, but really how can we solve for those needs of humans and make people want to be there?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting too to see your showroom in New York City last month. I did look around and I was like, I think we toured all of it. There's no office space. I'm going to put that in air quotes for everybody that's not watching. Because all of the workers that were there in the showroom were just finding a space within their showroom to work. And I thought that was really interesting because they're on display too. We're walking by, hi, what call are you on? But it was really cool to see how they got to choose where they wanted to work every day. And there were some big differences in desks and setups and privacy and acoustics and everything. So you kind of were a working solution to what we are trying to currently figure out. And I think as soon as it's one of those things that when you experience something and you can regurgitate it, then you can teach it. So my challenge to you guys is to really educate us designers, like not just like, here's a CEO, but like, okay, here's your test on the CEO. Like, I want to make sure you listened. Because I think it's really important because we're making such a huge impact on our communities, and we can make a bigger impact with the knowledge that you guys have. So I know I'm a nerd about it, so I will find that research tab and go through all those white papers and listen to your Work Better podcast, by the way, which is a good one. But yeah, nice I think
plug. Thank you.
It's really important to share this knowledge. So being transparent is an amazing thing for a company like you guys to do. But on another note, so Danielle, we went to dinner last night and she shared with me this thing and I was like, my jaw just dropped. I was like, what?
Oh.
So Danielle used to teach design thinking.
I did.
Exactly. See, it's very specialized, right? And I think when we say design thinking to other people, they assume, oh yeah, because you're interior designers. Right? It's this creative thing, but it's not. So I would love for you to explain to us today what design thinking is.
Yes. So design thinking is problem solving with the user in mind. So, I mean, that in the simplest form, I think, it was funny on the drive over, McKenna asked me, when was the time in your life that you used design thinking the most? And I said, outside of teaching it. And that was with the military. So I was always a civilian, came in on a contract basis to work with different parts of the military and use design thinking as a platform to problem solve whatever they were working through, whether it's submarine redesign, whether it was systems thinking, whether it was cyber warfare, looking at using design thinking and the user, what the experience is, to fully understand a problem solving solution. And I found that just in my own personal life, when I became a parent, was probably the greatest moment of design thinking
that you could ever experience. You're
and for the listener, and humor me for a second, because, and apologies if you have a fur baby at home, great, but it's very similar, right?
I have four
fur babies. There is, you have to keep this little human alive, and it doesn't matter how much you try to understand. So you're reading books, you're looking at podcasts, you're, on scrolling through Instagram to find a solution. A part of it is testing that idea on how to make that particular user, right, in this case, a child, life better or problem solve something. So in design thinking is at the core of how Steelcase approaches problems. So for example, we do a lot of work in the healthcare space. We will live in the world of a hospital and just try to understand what it's like for the patient, for the caregiver, and for the doctor, and design spaces and furniture that support that. So I took that methodology and used it in a different capacity with the military for a few years. And it was really interesting to see individuals that were so used to rank and file and typically, very constrained in the way their thinking is, to break down all the barriers of what can be and try to problem solve something and the what, right? Like, what is the central question, and using that methodology to solve for it. So I think design thinking is something that, for me, anybody with a design degree has a special superpower. You approach things without an automatic solution. It's this idea, process, and iteration that, fail fast, fail early, try different things that I think lead to greater design and greater outcomes. And that is part of what the design thinking process is.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting when you research what design thinking is. You're like, I wasn't necessarily taught that in school, but I was taught that in school, just in different terminology of bubble diagrams and then adjacency matrices and all of those things that you do in school and in life. But I think, McKenna, you actually touched on it in one of your previous examples. Was, I think, empathy is like the key ingredient to make design thinking at all successful. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
And so when you're saying you're going into these hospitals, you're going in to find those pain points, to relate to those people that are working 12-hour shifts with no breaks. And do they have a personal locker? Do they have a break room? Do they have access to daylight? Do they have access to food, drinking, all of that stuff? You're empathizing with their day-to-day routine, where it's, for them, that's their day-to-day. And you're just looking at it like completely different eyes and a different perspective, which then allows you to ideate on it differently, to make these different protocols for what if, because if you're just used to it, yes, you can make that better, but I bet it's just 90% different than what you're already doing, whereas we're looking at it 90% differently and maybe 10% what you were doing. So I think that's really interesting that you had pointed on that empathy. And I thought it was also really cool to understand that it's not linear, right?
It's an iterative process. It's interesting you say about empathy. And one of the things that we even do on ourselves in terms of understanding whether it's a vertical market or a client, is this idea of empathy mapping.
Oh, tell me about empathy mapping.
Yeah. So imagine like a persona you have a client, imagine the many personas within that organization. and actually trying to understand how they think, how they feel, what they experience on a day-to-day basis. And it's very hard for a user, especially if you're trying to qualify and understand a client, what their needs are, particularly in terms of how it translates to design. And using an empathy map process, literally it's almost like a one-sheeter with the persona or the individual in the center. And how do they think? How do they feel? How do they experience a space? And doing that with the user in mind in terms of how they're going to experience a space or how they're going to walk through that particular scenario. And it's, I think some of the largest organizations in the world, Microsoft that does this very, very well when they build a campus, they'll actually build out the users, the individuals that will experience that campus and what parking feels like, what, a food experience might look and feel like. They'll actually go through what does trying to find a meeting space look and feel like, and try to go into the mind of the user to map out and design a space.
It's really interesting because we do that, but we coin it the day in the life.
Yeah.
So then we find those personas per project type and then literally follow them from going there, parking, going through, and then leaving. So that's really interesting. Empathy map is a really great way to put a better blanket term over that. I was recently just shadowing a manager in a cardiology unit a couple of weeks ago, and it was eye-opening on how this department was functioning really well. Like they're making really good movements and change for our community that clearly needs support in the cardiology department, but they were doing it with like less than half of the tools that they really needed to. It was just like, dang, we are really good at making what we have work for us when we could do things better in different space. So because we're all in the space area, one way or another, where it's furniture, the building of the space for the furniture, it's all having empathy for the end user that is either using or treating, and all bettering the community at the end. The bottom line is just making everybody better, which is amazing. So I want to thank you guys for joining us today. It's been such a fun conversation, and I wanted to ask you one closing question. And the question is, if you, I'm laughing because I'm so curious.
What are you
know.
gonna ask us?
Wait a minute. If you were to tell a little designer like me what you wish I would have known or wish I would have done, what would you say?
Well, I'm laughing because I'm looking to you for this advice. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm the little designer. I need Melissa's advice. So that's why I'm giggling right away. I think...
Yeah. What do you wish designers like me knew?
On an overall scale?
Well, with all the knowledge you have, and then all the knowledge that we have access to, but not a lot of time.
I would add
keyword time. What would you wish that we would put more attention to?
I don't even think it's ownership on you all. I think it's knowing that we are here to partner with you. As we've talked a lot about, we do research and CEUs and white papers beyond the world of furniture that we live in. We also have so many amazing tools that we want to share in addition to it. We have amazing workplace tools and all of our research that can help really work in tandem together with your clients to help solve their needs. And so I want you all to know that feel free to lean on us and ask us, hey, I have X amount of design billable hours left, and I really want to...
You have a friend in me.
Exactly. But we really want to ensure this client is getting the best experience and we're providing the best solution. It goes so much further than just products. And I get really giddy about it. I think it's exciting to be a part of that level of detail and workshopping and design charrettes and just the information you gain and the connection you get with your clients as well as our partners, our A&D partners. It makes it so much more impactful. And I think it results in such a great success. You can see that energy in the space. So if anything, I hope you know that we want to help. We want to be there. So please lean on us. You guys are all doing amazing work. And there's only 24 hours in the day.
There's only 24 hours. I did ask for more time from John Weir today. I was like, he's like, do you need anything from me? I was like, another hour in the day?
Say that all the time.
What about you, Danielle? Do you wish that we knew? It's a charged one, I know.
It's a charged one. I know. I think McKenna answered it perfectly in the sense that some of my best experiences is when I had, I believe in work-life integration. Like,
yep.
The designers in my life are my friends in my life, and we, we're solving a problem together. So whether it's a challenging client that is really hard articulating, how they collaborate or, what type of privacy they need in their space, and, not being afraid. Not that designers are ever afraid, but pick up the phone.
We can
pick
get
up the
shaken
phone
our boots sometimes.
because
it is the Wild West. We're talking about the Wild West here.
But I think, we're more than just furniture. And so a lot of times some of the best engagements I've had is when we are at the table just talking about research or the things that the client's trying to solve. We're all on that one team trying to make the greatest space for this individual client.
That's awesome. Well, that's a good note to end on. We're more than just furniture. We are teammates. I love it. So thank you again for coming all the way up to Anchorage, Alaska, and giving us this time of your day. I appreciate
you so
it.
much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yay.
Complementary Colors is a production of MCG Explore Design, an architecture and interior design firm located in beautiful Anchorage, Alaska. If you'd like to hear more future episodes, be sure to subscribe to Complementary Colors wherever you find podcasts.